The question isn't how the US captured Venezuela's president. It's why it happened now. If it looks late, it wasn't. It was deliberate. Power doesn't move at the first chance. It waits for the moment that costs the least and gains the most. The public explanation was security. The real reasons go deeper: energy, influence, and leverage. This isn't just Venezuela's story. It's how geopolitics really works. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, an estimated 303 billion barrels, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran, more than Russia. Yet, despite this abundance, Venezuela's oil sector collapsed. Decades of mismanagement, underinvestment, corruption, and international sanctions hollowed out production capacity. Infrastructure decayed. Refineries shut down. Skilled labor fled. By the late 2000s, Venezuela had become a paradox, a petrostate without functioning petroleum power. For Washington, this represented both a problem and an opportunity. Not all oil is equal. Venezuelan crude is heavy oil, a type particularly well-suited for refineries along the U.S. Gulf Coast. Refineries that were specifically designed to process this grade. For years, American energy infrastructure was built with Venezuelan oil in mind. Access to this supply offers Washington three strategic advantages. First, lower domestic fuel prices, easing political pressure at home. Second, energy security, reducing dependence on volatile global markets. Third, economic leverage by controlling a supply chain once weaponized against U.S. interests. But oil is not just fuel. Oil is revenue, and revenue is power. For the Maduro government, oil exports were the last remaining financial lifeline, funding state operations, patronage networks, and political survival. Cut that lifeline, and the regime weakens. Control it, and the balance of power shifts. The story does not end with oil, it escalates with China. After U.S. sanctions in 2019 severed direct American imports, Beijing stepped in. Over the last decade, China extended nearly $50 billion in loans to Venezuela, loans repaid not in cash, but in oil. By 2023, 68% of Venezuelan crude exports were flowing eastward to China. This was not charity, it was strategic positioning. For Beijing, Venezuela offered long-term energy security, political influence in America's traditional sphere, a foothold in Latin America's resource economy. For Washington, this was unacceptable. The U.S. does not merely compete with China globally. It seeks to prevent China from gaining strategic depth in the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela became a frontline state in that rivalry. In 1823, the United States declared the Monroe Doctrine, a warning that external powers would not be tolerated in the Americas. For decades, the doctrine faded from public language, but it never vanished from strategic thinking. Recent White House strategy documents signal a recalibration, less focus on distant theaters, more emphasis on regional dominance. The logic is simple. If the U.S. cannot secure its own hemisphere, it cannot compete globally. Venezuela, aligned with China and hostile to U.S. interests, became a direct violation of that principle. Intervention in this framework is not aggression, it is containment. Officially, the intervention was justified as a response to narco-terrorism, maritime insecurity, regional destabilization. These threats are real, but they are not sufficient to explain a full-scale military operation. In geopolitics, security narratives often function as permission structures. They make strategic actions politically viable. The deeper logic was economic and geopolitical. Remove a China-aligned regime, reassert U.S. influence, restructure Venezuela's oil economy, signal resolve to regional allies. This dual-track messaging is not unusual. It is how great powers manage legitimacy. Beyond oil extraction lies a broader objective: market integration. Opposition leaders have reportedly discussed reopening Venezuelan markets to American firms, energy, infrastructure, logistics, and finance. This echoes the early 20th century open door policy, a strategy designed to ensure that markets remain accessible to U.S. capital, backed when necessary by power. The goal is not colonial control, it is systemic alignment. A Venezuela plugged into U.S.-led financial and trade systems becomes less dependent on China, more predictable, more governable within the American-led order. The removal of Maduro marks the most direct U.S. intervention in Latin America in decades. But intervention creates responsibility. Washington now faces difficult questions. Can Venezuela be stabilized without prolonged occupation? Can its oil sector be rebuilt without triggering backlash? How will China respond to the loss of a major energy partner? Great powers rarely exit cleanly from regime change operations. The real test is not military success, it is political aftermath. This intervention was not about one president. It was about who controls energy, who sets rules, and who shapes regions. Venezuela reveals a larger truth of the 21st century. The era of ideology has faded. The era of resource geopolitics has returned. Oil, markets, influence, and rivalry now define foreign policy decisions more than slogans ever did. And as great powers compete for strategic space, countries rich in resources but weak in institutions will remain battlegrounds, not of armies, but of interests.